And welcome to episode number 35 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and with me is Shane, and we are amateur astronomers that do these podcasts as basically a podcast of our own sort of personal journey of amateur astronomy. We've been doing it for quite a long time, and we have these conversations pretty much anyway, and it was Shane's idea to kind of start putting them out as a podcast, and it's been a lot of fun and really not that much work, and I think the lack of effort is really going to be shown today in the objects to observe in the night sky for August of 2020. How are you this afternoon, Shane?
I am all right. How about you?
I'm doing good. I nearly forgot that this was the episode for our monthly objects to observe podcast, and I kind of started to sketch out some other, and I was like, wait a second, we've got to tell people what to go look at in the night sky at least once a month. So,
yeah, I'm glad you remembered because I forgot.
Well, I figured I would do this, and actually what happened was I started to compose it, and then I thought, I'm going to send this to Shane. He's going to say, that's great, but what about actually what we should be doing?
Well, at least we didn't both forget about it. That's good.
So my mount apparently is somewhere, perhaps even in Canada. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't think I mentioned this in the last episode there that we just recorded, but I was out observing last night, and I've got that pretty heavy Altaz mount. It's about an 8 or a 10 pound mount head, and I've got it mounted to a cherry tripod that Rudolf Dorner of the Rudolf Dorner Telescope Museum had made back before I was on this earth, and had gifted it to me one night while observing in Ontario. But anyway, as you know, like that mount kind of threads onto an adapter on top of the tripod, just like most mounts do. This one was customized though, and so you can secure it quite well to the tripod. But last night, for whatever reason, I couldn't. It seemed to stay a little bit loose. And so I messed with it a little bit. It was still a little loose. I thought, whatever, I'm not going to worry about it that much. I'm just going to do an hour and a half, whatever I end up doing. And at one point, I rotated the telescope, and it seemed to really bite. And I thought, that's kind of interesting, but it seems super stable now. Well, then when I went to take it down, I could not get the mount head off of the tripod. It had like bound or like somehow bind it to the adapter. It was just totally stuck. So as I was mentioning, I've got these stitches in my back, of course. So I'm trying to figure out a way. I can't get it off. So I'm trying to manipulate the mount and the tripod to go in the back. I have an SUV, but it's a very compact hatchback like SUV, as you know, and it really doesn't have that much room in the trunk. So I was like, oh man, am I gonna have to leave it out here, go back home, although it's not that far, get my wife's larger vehicle and come back out and get the mount, or what am I gonna do? And I just barely got it squeezed in the back. I had the legs covered in dirt, almost on the ceiling, and anyway, I got it home and eventually did get it taken apart. But I was like, man, I really need that other mount, because this mount, first of all, it's too much mount for the little telescope, and I think that's what it is. So with my heavier telescope that I put on it, it seems like it weights down on the mount, so I can thread it in a little bit easier. Whereas this one, even when I'm threading it in, it still almost has some play in it, just because the telescope isn't pushing it onto the mount or something. It just doesn't seem like it's the right mount for this telescope. I think last night really proved it to me as I was kind of popping stitches at 1 o'clock in the morning while trying to do all this. So that was fun.
Sounds awful.
Yeah. No, it wasn't a great way to end the session. But yeah, it is what it is. So hopefully within the next couple weeks, I'll see that mount. It's been kind of epic getting it. My order is now getting on to 2 months ago, so we'll see. But and then I'll probably have to mess with that mount to get it working the way I want. So I sent you a couple images from our friend Hal.
Yeah,
I don't know if you had a chance to take a quick look, but
I
he's out in
did.
BC. So he lived here in Saskatchewan for a period of time. He was going to the university here. He came to Canada and was going to the University of Regina, and we had met up here when he was going there, and we were more involved in the astronomy club at that time, and he became sort of one of our good observing friends. But he has subsequently moved around a bunch, but he writes me frequently when the skies are good. He's able to get observing because he can't find other people to observe with in the places that he ends up going. Sometimes they're just super remote, or he goes to a place and there are amateur astronomers, but they're not really into going out that much, or for whatever reason isn't able to meet up with them. So anyway, we stay in touch, and it was really neat to see. He got some pretty good shots of like the Milky Way through Cygnus. Looks like.
Yeah, there's one photo. It's the subject was Astronomy Photos 1, and it's the last photo. Is that a double star?
Yeah, I think that's a double of some sort. He didn't send me too much in the way of details, and he was sending these right before we started doing our recordings today. So I was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry, I gotta like go do stuff," and I was just on my watch, so I wasn't able to kind of connect back with him and find out. But
I
yeah,
think
I'll
it's
try to.
Polaris.
Oh, is it Polaris?
Well, I think so because every star has a little bit of a trail in that photograph, except for the central star.
Okay.
So and Polaris is a real tight double, so that might be it.
Huh.
But yeah, I'm curious if he can confirm that or what he was looking at.
Yeah, I'll write him back later and then see maybe we can tweet some of the photos out. If I'm sure he'll give us permission. He's sending them to us for a reason, which is that I think he enjoys sharing his astro photos and his observing experiences, just like we do. Yeah, it's too bad he was going to come to the Saskatchewan Summer Star Party last year. I actually ended up going, and one of the reasons was that he and I were going to try to meet up there because he was going to drive over because he's got some friends or family in Alberta. And then that didn't happen. So we're like, yeah, for sure, like this year. And then of course this year is the pandemic. So that's not happening. But hopefully, like I think he is getting a little bit more settled now. Like, he just graduated from university a handful of years ago, I guess 4 or 5 years ago now, and sort of moving around, trying to find more of like a permanent place to kind of put down roots or whatever. I suppose is I've gone through as well. And anyhow, so hopefully in the coming years, once he'll be able to come over and do some observing with us. I know he frequently says how much he does miss doing some of the camping and observing that we do, which I do really enjoy as well, and certainly have been missing this year. Yeah, it's not been as good.
Yeah, agreed. I do miss it. I'm really hoping, well, towards the end of August here, which we'll talk about during New Moon, to get out to our favorite spot in Grasslands National Park, and fingers crossed for September, and maybe we try that fateful October trip again too.
Yeah, I mean that's probably our best bet almost at this point. Like I don't know, like I was down in the grasslands recently, and there's a lot of people from different places showing up, and a lot of people have different views on how they're handling the pandemic. And personally, I'm following the government regulations and guidelines, as I know you are. And not everybody is, though, and some people will just walk up to you and start talking. And like they're not they're people from all over Canada that are there, and there certainly is a heightened level of risk in those kind of situations because you don't know if they're taking off from an area that has a lot of outbreaks, and there is an outbreak currently going on in the area where Grasslands is, unfortunately. So definitely there are some risks there. It's very unfortunate, but yeah. So yeah, just depending. Just depending. So I might be doing most of my observing from a field that's less than 10 kilometers from my house this year.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. In fact, that's one of the reasons. Like this past weekend, well, like right now, originally I had thought I would be in the grasslands this weekend, but with everything going on, I thought, yeah, I can enjoy some observing much closer to home and avoid some of that pandemic risk. So that
Yeah,
was my decision. My hope is that in September, particularly, there's just less people traveling. Kids will be back in school.
yeah,
That maybe you and I would be the only ones in grasslands.
yeah. Maybe, yeah, maybe we'll have to see. But like even talking to Mike, like he was saying, it would be like it's just difficult to even go and meet up with him and the spots where he's going to observe because he's going to some of these campgrounds and like it's far enough that we'd have to camp, but it's just there's a lot of logistics and challenges. Like he's got his own self-contained unit and all that stuff. And I don't know about using like communal restroom facilities and all this kind of stuff in some of these areas that either having outbreaks or having people who are coming from places that are having outbreaks. So I don't know. We'll just have to like where I observed last night. It's like as far as any kind of COVID goes, it is very safe because nobody ever goes down this road. I've never seen anybody on this road ever, except for a farmer one afternoon when I went out there for a hike because it's just a beautiful spot. So yeah, I don't think that anybody's ever going to come along on this road. Um, there's a bridge on it, and I think I drove my car across it once, and I think that I still have the sweat stains on the seat from that experience. So it's pretty sketchy. Nobody I think would choose to actually go down this road. So other than like the odd errant person who for whatever reason ended up on this road at night and was lost, yeah, that would be it. But it's dirt and it's crisscrossed with a creek, and the bridges that go across it are like, you know, somebody just took some trees and made boards themselves, and I don't even know that there's nails in them. It's very sketchy. So that seems like a pretty safe spot. I think like if you and Mike came out there with me, we can be pretty safe observing there. So I've been doing some writing. Did some writing down in the grasslands. Writing an article on Scorpius. I don't know if I was telling you about that or if I mentioned it in the past podcast. So
Yeah, you mentioned it in that podcast we did about preparing to go to grasslands.
yeah, so I've been working a little bit more on that. And I did notice that in the handbook, for whatever reason, the double stars don't seem. It's funny, like, and I guess maybe that's one of my sort of general complaints about maybe a lot of the stuff that's written about astronomy is it tends to be either more academic and maybe less practical oriented. Like, so like the double stars and some of the stars that are in the handbook for Scorpius, like I'm looking at them, I'm like, why are like these are not the ones I would choose, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I do find that a little bit of a challenge when I'm writing these. So I'm not sure how much of them I'm going to include. I'm also writing an article on the comet Neowise. So now that we're kind of pretty much at the end of its observable time, or apparition, as we call it in observing circles, um, I went and did some sketching. My original intent was I would do a naked eye sketch, a binocular sketch, and a through the telescope sketch. I would write an article about my observing and the comet and put that out. And then I started getting sketches from other observers that I know on these very very small lists that I belong to, with I think like 20 and 30 people maybe. And so I asked if I could use their sketches because, frankly, their sketches are much better and more interesting than mine. So Kathleen sent me one today, and Bill from Vancouver sent me one. Kathleen's here in Saskatoon, and I ended up with like 4 or 5 different ones from a couple from the States and different places, just different observers that I know either personally or know over email or through books. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of trying to get that out. I hope to finish it this weekend, but actually the observing is getting in the way of my writing right now. So I guess it's not so bad.
You're a busy guy.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I got to work this week. Kind of this darn work business. So
Yeah, I find work gets in the way of most things good in life.
it can. I mean, I don't mind. We're fortunate to have the jobs we have, but yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit more time for doing some of this stuff. So I think I'm going to take a week off around New Moon in August, maybe do some do some other observing. Maybe we can get out. But yeah, I think we should start using this close in sight a bit more. I think it should be pretty easy because you can get on the bypass and then meet me there. Like you would just get off the exit close to my house, and in fact, that exit is if you stood on the lamp pole on top of that exit, you would be able to see my car headlights sitting on my observing site. Like it's that close to it. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, you can hear the cars, but you can't see them. It's sort of this perfect arrangement. They're just out of sight.
Huh. Yeah, I
Yep.
can't wait to check it out. I have that week booked off already, actually.
Oh, right on.
So if you're off, we'll probably have some time to get out
Hmm.
then.
Yeah, I would like to start using it. Would like to start getting out there a bit more because I don't know how long does it take you to drive to my house? Like what, 15 minutes?
Yeah, about 15 minutes, depending
Yeah,
on how some lights. It's not too bad.
yeah. So you'd be 20 minutes to there. For me, it's 7. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah. And it's good. I think like your Milky Way is better than from the from Pilot Butte trails. So
Okay.
yeah, so I think I think it's a better site than that site in some respects. There are some lights, but they're far. They're very bright, but they're far. But anyway, I'm just going to adjust things here. My stitches are leading in, so my apologies for moving around. All right, so we've got some observing. We're starting to actually even talk about our observing plans for August, which are going to center around the new moon. But we have Venus starting to get really bright in the morning sky. It's going to be at its greatest western elongation on the 13th. Mars is getting good. Have you taken a look at Mars yet? Like try to get a really good view of it?
No, I have a terrible obstruction to the east. Like I probably lose about, from my backyard, easily the first 30 degrees of the sky, maybe even a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I have to wait a little bit till it starts to, you know, kind of poke around some of these structures.
Yeah. I have absolutely the worst yard for light pollution, which people might find very strange. What, like, in fact, you've been in my house. I'm sure you thought, why did Chris pick this house? Well, I didn't pick the house for astronomy. First of all, I picked it because it was the one that my spouse liked the most. So, there's that. And the other thing is that it does have amazing horizons there. I lose very little of my horizon. In fact, I can get probably 80 to maybe 75 to 80% of the entire sky from somewhere on my property. So even when the comet was very low in the morning sky, I went out to look at it from a dark site. But when I came home, I was able to kind of find it between. There's like some trees around, but they're all still pretty small, and there's lots of light. But I can, if the planets are up and they're high enough to make it worthwhile seeing, I can see them. I did try to do an observation of Mars from the grasslands, but it was still too low. I looked at it last night, just naked eye, very, very low, still in the evening. So you'd have to get up, and sunrise here is this morning, 5:18 a.m. So you really have to get up at like 4, probably more like 3 to get a view, and it's still not going to be that high yet. So I think there's probably a few more weeks to come here. But as it starts getting towards the end of the month, Mars is going to grow from approximately, like right now, I think it's just like 13, uh, arc seconds in size, arc minutes in size to 19. So it's gonna get to be quite a bit bigger towards the end of the month. So it's really going to start to become well observed, and then it should rise. Well, it will rise higher and higher in the evening sky, so that'll make it easier. Jupiter's now past opposition, so it's well above the horizon as evening gets dark. But as you and I noted, on any night that has like less than average seeing, it's a bit of a mess up there. Same with Saturn.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm going to keep observing it because you can still sometimes get those moments of clarity, and there's just so much to see on Jupiter in particular.
Yeah,
I'll still keep trying, but it is a little disappointing. It's slowly transitioning, to appear later and later in the year, which means higher and higher in the sky,
yeah.
and it'll just take some time.
Yeah, I think it'll get better here in the coming weeks, especially where one of the challenges is, when it's not really even dark enough to start observing until 11 o'clock these nights, is that your window for getting good seeing conditions is very narrow. So, if you're only going out for an hour or so, like an hour and a half to sort of 2 hours is kind of max, like by 1 or 1:30 in the morning, I'm pretty bagged.
Mm.
Um, and, once it's dark at 10, even though Jupiter and Saturn would be moving further away, we're going to gain another hour to an hour and a half here over the coming month. So hopefully that will coincide with some better seeing conditions. And then as well, like, if you can observe it another hour and a half, you're doing an hour and a half or 2 hours now, well, then you've just expanded to a 3 or 4 hour window where you have a better chance of getting better seeing versus, what are the chances that 1 hour a day is going to have good seeing? Well, that's like very low, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's the same thing. Uranus is actually, and I didn't know this. I was reading this in the Observer's Handbook this afternoon or this morning when I was sort of making. And I say making up the show notes. That's a bit of a stretch for what I did this month. You're laughing because I just like. Well, typically this is kind of what I do, which is in the RASC Observer's Handbook they have the sky month to month, and it's well done. It's been done this way for, I was going to say centuries, but it's more than a century actually. And it breaks down different things, and I kind of highlight the things that I think are important, and then what I do is I type them out into some show notes and then maybe add some other stuff. And then this month, just with the tight timeline, and maybe I'm a bit lazy today because I was observing late last night. I think if our viewers can understand one thing, it's that we're actually going out and doing astronomy more so than focusing on what the podcast content will be. We're creating the content by actually doing the astronomy, not just creating content. So yeah, I just highlighted them this week, took some photos and put them in and called those the show notes and sent Shane the link. So, but anyway, I was reading about Uranus and it reaches the stationary point of the 15th, but that's not the thing that I thought was so interesting. It reaches its highest point of declination, nearly plus 15 degrees. So this is plus 15 degrees in declination. And that's the highest point since the early 60s.
That's interesting.
I was like, really? Like, that seems kind of strange. But anyway, that's the way it is. So maybe, we were talking about how low the planets Jupiter and Saturn were earlier. Well, maybe here, if we get a night, even with the moon up, maybe we should go out and try to hunt down Uranus.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, could be some good fun. And then Neptune is rising. I think they're both in Aquarius. It didn't actually say which constellation Uranus is in, but I think they are both in Aquarius. Or if it isn't in Aquarius, I think it's just over the line with like Pisces or something like that. But Neptune is in Aquarius as well. So I think they can both be a little bit of a challenge. But do you have anything to add to that bit?
Well, when we try for Uranus, I'm curious about our ability to detect any of the color or just how it appears from a color standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're using some smaller instruments. I've definitely seen color in the past, like with an 8-inch Dobsonian, but with a 3-inch refractor or a 4-inch refractor, I'm just curious what we're able to see with that.
Yeah, I gotta say, and I feel like we should hit Takahashi up for some sponsorship money. But in all seriousness, and although I don't think anybody would say that the Takahashi is an inexpensive telescope, they definitely are not. At least not to me anyway. I think that anything that costs into the hundreds or even into the single-digit thousands of dollars, and they're around $2,000 or so, is a significant amount of money. But one thing I was thinking about is that a lot of people will buy like a decent 4-inch or something around 4 inches, okay, and then they'll buy something that's like a 60 millimeter or 70 millimeter for like the ultimate grab and go. But I'll tell you, the Takahashi 100 DC, which I think is actually going to go away because they've brought out the DZ now. And I think that's unfortunate because I think the Takahashi 100 DC is like in many ways the perfect telescope. I've looked through a lot of telescopes, I've owned a lot, and it is quickly, very, very quickly becoming absolutely my favorite telescope because it's the same size, maybe I should say the same weight, and just slightly bigger than most of the 80 millimeters that are out there. So it's the same weight, just a little bigger. In fact, not that much bigger, but it punches so close to my 5-inch apochromate for half the weight. So much easier to mount, so much easier to set up and tear down, and the images through it are just astounding. How good the images are. So I actually think that it's a bargain for the price, even though it's like a $2,000 telescope. I actually think that it's the best bargain out there for how good the images are, considering that most, or I shouldn't say most, about the most affordable 4-inches are about half the cost, and they're just not going to give you the images. And then most people who do buy those instruments, which are heavier instruments and more difficult to mount, more costly to mount instruments. So there is a trade-off there, and there is a trade-off on cost where you're not paying as much, but you got to buy a bigger mount. The Takahashi doesn't need that bigger mount. And then most of those people are going to be unhappy with the portability of the larger, more inexpensive 4-inches, that they're going to want to go out and buy a smaller telescope. And so now you're owning two instruments, one much smaller, one larger and heavy. But I really think that with the Takahashi, you can just do away with that whole scenario. And I see that so much online at clubs and that. And I think that between the cost of the larger telescope that requires a larger, more expensive mount, and the smaller telescope and the smaller, less expensive mount, you can easily, if people are going down that route, they can buy a Takahashi 100 DC and one mount, and you have. I gotta say, I've looked through a lot of smaller, more inexpensive telescopes and similar telescopes, and nothing comes close to this. I gotta say that. So.
Well, and there's a lot to be said about keeping it simple, and the lightweight aspect of a telescope is very important because, like you say, it allows you to use lighter mounts and lighter tripods, which saves you money in the long run too, because the beefier, heavyweight stuff just costs more money. It's a little bit harder to transport. The 76 millimeter tack that I have sits on a tripod just by the back door, and I grab it all in one hand with eyepieces in the other hand and go outside. It's a very easy setup to move around the yard. And even though the mount is a lightweight mount with a lightweight tripod, I was pushing high magnifications Friday night without any real issue. Like, it was a pleasure to use.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a bit of a strange thing, but this 100 millimeter, like I have what is commonly referred to as an ST80 as well, and it's 80 millimeter f5 achromatic. It's basically like the most inexpensive telescope. You and I have talked about that quite a bit, and we've been modifying it, and it's really fun because it gives you about the widest field of view possible. But honestly, that telescope is so close in weight to the 100 that given the option, which I have, is that I have this 99 super wide field, kind of fun to use telescope, which I would have taken out if it was windy, like I mentioned the dust before. But without the wind, there's no way I wouldn't take the Takahashi over that. Like, there's just no comparison between a 4-inch and an 80, and especially like between a 99 and a $2,000 telescope that's of Takahashi quality. There's just no comparison. So you take the Takahashi every time in that situation. And the weight, there's no weight like the f5 80 millimeter is a little bit more awkward to handle than the TAC. So it weighs maybe a pound lighter, maybe 1 pound lighter. And so it's so close in weight, you just get so much more with the 4-inch versus the 3-inch. But let's get on and talk about what we're going to observe this month. So bit of a tangent there, but I've just really enjoyed that telescope. On Sunday the 2nd, so this is going to be when is this? This is just Sunday coming up, eh?
Yeah.
So it's coming up fast. I start teaching my class a week and a half now, on the 5th of August. I'm going to start teaching my
Oh,
astronomy
wow.
class via Zoom through the university. I did ask if I could promote it, and they said nothing. So I don't know. I don't know if people need to be in Regina or what. And because I haven't done it before, I'm like, maybe I don't want to drag people into this experiment just yet. So I'm going to do, it's a very short, I'm just doing four sessions over 4 weeks, and we'll see how it goes. And I can't stress this enough, I have some concerns. So one of the things I like to do is, because you've attended my classes before, is I like to show like video clips, and that
Oh, yeah.
that forms like sort of one of the core things that I do, like talk about something and I'll show a bit of a video and use some online resources. And I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'm not sure how some of the other stuff is going to work. So I don't know. There's 10 willing participants, and I think they've offered it to them at an extreme discount. I think like 70% off or something, so that we can kind of run the experiment. So once we do that, though, I think kind of once I get to the end of that 4-week session and know that that nobody's out any money for it, then I think I'll be more comfortable with promoting it to a wider audience. So I'm kind of excited to do it.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
coming up on Sunday, August 2nd, we're going to have Jupiter just 1.5 degrees north of the moon. So Saturn that night is going to be 2 degrees north of the moon. I think it's kind of like as it moves across during the evening, probably as evening begins, Jupiter is just going to be right above the moon, and then kind of towards sunrise, it's going to have switched over just below Saturn. So that's going to be pretty interesting to take a look at. These have been occurring for the past several months, but I think this is the first one where they're going to be easily visible in the evening sky. People are going to be looking up and going, I think this is going to be actually pretty impressive. I don't know about you, Shane, but having Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon up there together, I think people are going to walk out, especially because people have been following the Neowise story and kind of getting interested in the night sky, even if I know a lot of people have struggled to see it because it is kind of a faint thing. But this, I think people are going to look up and go, I didn't see that comet thing, but what is, like, something's happening here, right? We got 3 things that are super bright.
And they're all within like what, 2 or 3 degrees, did you say?
2 degrees.
Wow. So like a common refractor will allow you to see all 3 objects in one field of view, conceivably, if you have the right eyepiece in there.
Yeah, sorry, I might have misspoke a little bit. So the moon is going to be within 2 degrees of Jupiter, and then it's going to move over and be within 2 degrees of
Got
Saturn
it.
later in the evening. So the way I said it, I can understand. Like, didn't mean to do that. But I think when it's in between, they're not that far apart. I think they're about 6 or 7 degrees apart.
Yeah.
So like a low power pair of binoculars. And yeah, I think just the unaided eye view is going to be interesting. And what's going to be interesting is I think that even a very casual night sky watcher who goes out early in the evening and has now been more sky aware ever since trying to see Neowise is going to look up and say, hey, that's neat. The moon is just below this really bright star to the right of this other bright star. And then, maybe when they haul the trash out later on that night or something, they're going to look up and go, whoa, it's switched stars. And I think that's really going to, although you can see the moon move night to night, and people might recognize that it's in a different spot, typically it's not going to be so close to 2 things that are so bright. So I think that's going to be really neat. And for people with telescopes, of course, they can go out that night and take an actual look at the planets those nights. And the moon's going to be nearly full on those nights as well. But those planets are so bright that should still be able to see them quite well, because the moon's full on the 3rd. So of course, we don't really have that much interest in looking at the moon when it's full.
No, there's just not much to see.
No. Now, that said, I'm one of the few people that has gone out. Apparently, this is a strange thing. I think I might have mentioned it before, and sketched the moon. I've done a lot of lunar sketching of the full moon without any optical aid.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's sort of one of my deals. It's sort of an interesting to do. So that is one of the things you can do when there is a full moon. Now, going ahead a little bit more. Sorry, just got a bit of a pull on my stitch there. On the 9th, which is the following Sunday, Mars is then going to be just 0.8 degrees north of the moon. And the moon, it says in the handbook, will actually occult, meaning it goes in front of Mars. And it has this like star cross or something. Like, okay, well, where does this occur? Can Shane and I see it from Saskatchewan? Or maybe some listeners can see it from, well, Shane, do we have any listeners in Antarctica?
I don't think any have popped up there.
Yeah.
Is that the only place to see it?
Apparently, maybe like on the very southern tip of South America. I think there's like this, and I can't recall, like I watched a documentary on this town that's on the very southern tip where people take the research vessels or the cruises to Antarctica. So basically, if you have to be going to Antarctica in the next couple of weeks, set Sunday the 9th on your calendars. So, fun fact is that part of the world is actually on the same time zone as Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Don't know if you know that. So
I did not. No.
Yes. So oddly enough, when and you could theoretically, if you were looking at Mars that night and it was like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever, I guess, well, more like 9 or 10 o'clock, it rises. You could look at it at the same time as us and talk on the phone in real time, same time. Nobody's up in the middle of the night or anything. It's kind of a strange thing to think about because that seems really far away. It seems like it should be in this odd time zone or something. So anyway, Mars is going to pair up with the moon that night. Then on the 12th, now I don't think I mentioned this. I saw some really bright meteors last night, and so did Kathleen up in Saskatoon.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so there were some. I texted you while I was observing. I said, "Are you still observing?" And you were like, "No, I'm looking at a bright fire." I was like, "Okay, like no worries," because I was seeing these bright meteors coming in, and I was wondering if you were seeing this as well. But
another interesting note, I didn't see this Friday night when I was out observing, but apparently the aurora really kicked up and there was a lot of photographs, and I kind of got the sense that it wasn't really forecasted either, that it caught some people off guard, but I might be wrong on that part of it. Lots of nice photos Friday night.
Yeah, I think I saw some of the photos. Personally, I'm not a big aurora watcher. I'm happier when the aurora is not kicking up because I like to look at deep sky objects. So it's neat to see once in a while, but we're far enough north here that it can border on irritating from time to time. So.
Yeah, which some people are probably just shaking their head at you right now thinking, I've never seen it before. How could you not like it?
It was really cool the first few times, but after the first couple of years here, I was like, the aurora can get kind of old when we're having it that frequently. So we haven't been having it as frequently now, so I've been happier. Because there's no like aurora filter. Like it just sucks. Like if you're gonna go out and look at aurora, that's cool. You pack up a lawn chair or something, take a bottle of water and some snacks, and go and sit in a field or something and just look at the sky. You don't need it. But when you pack up all of your gear and you make an observing plan, and then you go out and it's just like really horrible light pollution, and you can't really observe, and you can sit there and look at the aurora if you want, but after you've seen I kind of feel like after you've seen like the aurora a pile of times, you've kind of had the experience, right? Like, I don't know what other kind of aurora experience I could have. It's neat. And if we don't have it, like right now, if I saw it, I would probably watch it because it's been like a year since I've seen a good aurora display. But anyway.
Well, we're coming out of the solar minimum, so the aurora activity should start picking up here over the next couple of years and slowly increase.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, good news for some, not so good news for you and I.
Yeah. But on the 12th, we have the Perseid meteor shower.
Yes.
So
one of the most active of the year during warm months.
Months, yeah.
There's is it the Orinids in December that are like the best shower of the year? But
the Geminids, which usually
yes.
They usually land on about the second week of December, and I've gone out to watch them on a few occasions, and I've seen lots of them, but it's not that pleasant. Like a buddy of mine, we would go out and watch them every year we'd pick a different like field, like though I'm not from Saskatchewan. Where I grew up was like the farming region in the Maritimes. So we have like all these big fields too. And we go out in these fields and we watch them, and it was neat, but it wasn't that much fun because it was so bloody cold watching the Geminids. But the Perseids, like you were saying, they're the best one that occurs during the warmer months. And there's just a last quarter moon that night, so the moon does rise later. Um, yeah, and even when the moon was up last night, like I could still see some pretty bright meteors coming in, and although it's not quite first quarter yet, yeah, it's going to be a fairly good show. Hopefully, did you ever see a really good Perseid meteor shower display?
Yeah, yeah. Before I was really into astronomy, I remember one night being out and I just couldn't believe it. It was like a nonstop streaks across the sky. The Perseid meteor shower can peak at over 200 meteors per hour, so that's a crazy rate. You know, that's a
Yeah.
lot of streaks going across the sky. But meteor showers are sort of similar to comets in that they're very unpredictable.
Mhm.
There's always forecasts out there as to how busy or yeah, I guess you know how many meteors you may see per hour. But it's I don't even know what science goes into that because it's very difficult to predict. You really just have to get outside of the city again to somewhat dark skies. All you need is a lawn chair. You do not want binoculars or anything like that. You want to take in as much of the sky as you can, and just sit up and look at the sky. And you'll definitely see meteors that night. How many? Who knows?
Yeah, and the couple I saw last night were bright. Like they were like first magnitude kind of thing. They were very bright. And
Okay.
yeah, the best shower I ever saw was probably 5 or 6 years ago when went to Mount Kobau for the Mount Kobau Star Party, and I went sort of just before the main part of the Star Party kicked off, and did a couple nights, and showed up after the long drive, and I just didn't feel like setting up my gear, and there was not that many observers. Maybe there was 7 or 8 people kicking around, and one guy had a pretty big telescope, and I said, "Hey, look, like I'm kind of bagged. Like, do you mind if I bum some views off you or whatever?" And I'm just going to look for meteors and kind of look through other people's, just see what other people are looking at. And there was like a few people with like some 8 and 10 inch dobs and stuff like that. And so I was like, this will be fine. Cause I'll do some observing. Then when I get too tired, I'll just go to bed without having to tear down. And so I was doing that for a while, and I was up. I hit a pretty big telescope, and I was up on a ladder looking through it, and suddenly I'm like, there's a lot of meteors coming in, folks. And then, we decided, we would just sort of stand there and watch for a while. So we watched for like 5 minutes, and we saw like 20, and we went, whoa, like let's get some chairs, and we just kind of they packed their scopes up, and we just sat out and watched the meteors for about 2 hours, and yeah, we saw hundreds of them. So
Yeah, that's
great.
very neat. And really, from now until the end of August, if people are out under darker skies, you're going to see way more meteors during this next 6 weeks than you would, most other times of the year. And they're all mostly Perseids that you're seeing. It's just they do peak on the 12th. That's when you'll see the majority of them because that's when Earth is passing through the densest part of this debris field left over from a comet.
Yeah, and Venus is back.
Oh,
Yeah, so hopefully I can get out and take a view of that. It's going to be at greatest western elongation on the 13th. Back, I think it was like the 27th or something like that of March. It was at greatest eastern elongation. So it was in the evening sky, and this is going to be in the morning sky. I saw it the other morning. I was like, what the heck is that? It's really like it really came up fast. Like for a long time, I think it was just on the horizon. I didn't see it, but now it's nice and high. Are you going to get up and observe it in the morning?
unlikely.
Okay.
I'll be honest, unlikely.
Yeah, I think I'll start trying to observe it again here pretty soon, and maybe do some sketching of it. I do quite enjoy it. With the 100 millimeter versus the 60, so I'm kind of excited to see what kind of cloud
Yeah.
formations the this great 100 millimeter attack will reveal. On the 15th, we're going to start getting some of these double shadow transits again on Jupiter, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And on the 15th as well, Venus is going to be 4 degrees south of the moon. So if somebody was so inclined, they could probably get a photo of the moon with most of the planets here over the coming weeks.
Yeah, you're right.
On the 17th. I'm not sure how visible this would be because the moon is going to be very small, but it says the moon is 1.7 degrees north of the Beehive cluster. But I don't really know that's an observable event because on the 19th, the moon is going to be new. And that's probably the week that we both have booked off work because we'll try to get in some deep sky observing that week.
Yes. Yep. Always focus when new moon is in the month and plan your observing around that.
Exactly. Exactly. And on the 22nd, another set of these double shadow transits. So the best way to figure out if those are visible is actually to run it through your planetarium software because for some people it'll be visible, for other people it won't. So as we get closer to the date, I see it's like the 15th, it's like 4 hours universal time. And on the 22nd, it's 6 hours and 30 minutes universal time. So yeah, I think it's going to be like, yeah, visible here late evening, something like that. So, if it's clear on those nights, like that's a reason to head out. So we have a asteroid at opposition on the 28th. I think you like to observe asteroids, Shane, maybe?
I'm intrigued by them, but
Yeah.
I've really not spent much time observing them. So it's actually it's on my long list of observing projects is to spend some time with asteroids, but I
Well,
haven't
there you
really
go.
done much of it yet.
Ceres on the 28th.
I'll lock it into the calendar.
You could start an entire series of asteroidal, although it's spelled with a C and ERES is nothing like. Yeah. And then on the 29th, Jupiter is going to be 1.4 degrees north of the moon, and Saturn is going to be 2 degrees north of the moon. So we're going to have, in the same month, although, people often talk about the blue moon being the two full moons in the month. I don't know what it is when you have Jupiter, Saturn paired with the moon twice on the same month. So the month is going to kind of end the way it starts with this pairing of Jupiter and Saturn. It starts on the 2nd with a pairing, and then our last main event for the month is on the 28th with another pairing of Jupiter and Saturn and the moon. It's going to be kind of neat. I think people are really going to take notice of this after Comet Neowise.
Yeah, yeah. When you get a collection of planets close to the moon like that, we talked about it on one of the previous podcasts. But what's neat about it is it just makes it so much easier to find the planets when on certain dates they're within a stone's throw of the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that in general, the general population, I think will notice this. I think it will be a thing. I think people will take like photos of their cell phone and then post them and then find out that these are planets. And yeah, and it could be an additional boon. I know they're selling more telescopes. They've sold more telescopes in the past 4 months at the telescope dealers than they have in the past 4 years or something like that, I heard. So I think people are really getting into astronomy during the pandemic of all things. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's very neat. Very neat indeed.
So that's sort of the end of my very lazy notes that I made for what to observe the night sky this coming month. Shan, I didn't know if you had any additional objects or interesting things that people might want to go and take a look at or not. I haven't looked up. I know there was another Comet Lemon that was around, but I hear it's a bit of a lemon,
Lemon.
not as bright as Neowise, maybe. So
Yeah, that was my only comment was, Neowise was a wonderful treat. I hope everybody got out to see it. But those events are quite rare where we have a bright comet and there's no real bright comets in the forecast right now.
yeah,
So probably the big things are the planets and the Perseids in August. And maybe one thing I'll add about the new moon is it's probably my favorite new moon of the year because it happens during a time when the temperatures are still warm. It's a nice time to be outside, but it's starting to get dark early. On in the third week of August, we can start to get darkness, probably around 10 or 11. And
oh
then
yeah,
really, if we want, we can observe till about 3 or so, maybe even 4 in the morning and
yeah.
be quite dark, which is fantastic. Up until the end of May, we really don't have much darkness until this point in
Mm-hmm.
August. So I'm really excited for this new moon because we can get in lots of good dark observing.
Yeah. No, it sounds good. Well, unless you don't have anything else to add, then maybe we'll wrap it up here. How does that sound?
That is a wrap, my friend.
All right. So how can people stay in touch with us? Maybe we should tell them that before we take off.
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter at Actual Astronomy. We try to tweet out some photographs of our equipment or things we're doing, as well as retweet or tweet out some extra additional resources to help you do your observing and to support what we're talking about in the podcast, just to provide a little more context. For example, we were talking a lot about observing Jupiter in the last episode, so I'll be tweeting out a link to Christopher Go's website, who does a lot of outstanding Jupiter imaging, which it's a handy resource. So if you're actually looking at Jupiter, say through a telescope, and you want to confirm some features that you've seen, go to Chris's site. He's got some awesome imagery, and it'll help you understand what you saw.
No relation to this, Chris.
No, different Chris entirely.
Yeah, his photos are amazing. And he's in the Philippines, and I'm not.
Yes.
And he images from his, I believe, if I'm recalling this correctly, it's like the roof of his apartment building or something. And I've seen photos of the setup, and it couldn't be like, in a way, like a more common place where somebody would have access to in a moderately sized city. And to see that he's doing images which rival the Hubble Space Telescope. And he's such a good photographer that they've given him time on like the Keck Observatory. And I think he's even at Hubble time as well and stuff.
Oh, wow. Yeah, his images are amazing. I go to his site lots, so we'll tweet that out. And if you want to email us, we are actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thanks so much, Shane.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for listening.